Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 6th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Lankitis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we will now read our purpose statement, and we invite anyone who is in the room to join us. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. Thank you. The first item on our agenda this evening is the public hearing on the Ames Middle School track resurface project. So if there is anyone who is here to speak on the Ames Middle School track resurface project, you may come up to the microphone. Trying to give my teacher wait time. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and close our public hearing and we'll move on to our celebrations and recognitions. And this evening we are thrilled to be celebrating our Ames High Wrestling program, and I will turn it over to Director Amy DeLashman.
Good evening, board and our distinguished guests. It is my honor to recognize both our girls and boys wrestling teams at Ames High School tonight. So we are here to celebrate the Ames High boys and girls wrestling teams, the Little Cyclones with head coach Andy Fecht and amazing assistant coaches were one of 2 programs with 3 or more 6th place or better finishes. Present from the boys team, if you want to stand up as I say your name, if you're here, Jackson Winky, a qualifier at 160 pounds. Kyler Hall was a 5th place finisher at 285 pounds. Denari Muscles Mickle finished runner up at 195, as did Jabari Hinson at 126. Congratulations. And now from the girls wrestling team, in their first year of sanctioned wrestling, really showed up and made Ames High proud. So first, Leah Stagg and Allison Meshke both qualified for state. Greta Goodman finished 6th. Lexa Rosbink finished 5th. And Alexis Winky finished 4th. Congratulations. And on behalf of the Ames Community School District, we want to congratulate you on a fantastic season and thank you for representing Ames High School.
Thank you all for coming out to be recognized this evening. It has been so much fun getting to watch you this season, and getting to watch our girls go to your first state meet was pretty exciting as well. And we are very proud of you. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. All right, the next item on our agenda this evening will be our discussion items, beginning with our board committee update. And tonight we have our School Improvement Advisory Committee, and we will look to Dr. Hawkins for an update on that.
Good evening, board.
Good evening.
Hope everybody's doing great tonight. I'm excited to talk with you about our recent School Improvement Advisory Committee meeting. As you may know from previous updates, there's some of the content of SIAC that is required in code, and there's sometimes we meet as a SIAC in order to go over topics that the committee has identified as a priority. This last meeting was the latter. So we met, and the content of our meeting was really dictated by our priorities as a SIAC rather than by code. On this evening, focused on a conversation around mental health. We had the opportunity to hear from 4 panelists who have a connection locally to mental health. And that was Nick Toonstra from Mary Greeley, Julie Saxon from the police department, Kara Luchtefeld, who works for SIPS, Central Iowa Psychological Association, and Jennifer Funk from our local Heartland AEA. The SIAC had come up with questions that they wanted to know these local experts' input on. Some examples of those questions were, how can we as a community best engage and support mental health? Or what can we do as a district to support the mental health of our employees? Or how can parents support the mental health of their students? There was actually 6 questions that we'd gotten to our panelists prior to them coming. We asked those questions and each panelist had the opportunity to weigh in, and we had a really robust conversation for an hour. Coming from that, I'd asked members of the SIAC committee to email me, hey, well, because several times in the course of their answers, resources were referenced that would be helpful in our buildings, or information about upcoming opportunities to become further involved or informed was referenced. And so I'd asked folks, email me and I can be a hub of connection and communication. So that's still in process. And then we wrapped up the SIAC meeting by having Director Deanie Thomas talk with us about the Mental Health Board Ad Hoc Committee. She updated the group around the purpose, of course, of that ad hoc committee, which is to develop a district-wide mental health plan that includes identification of need through data, supports for both students and staff, connection with community groups that offer free services for staff, and the review of applicable policies. And so she talked with the group for 15 to 20 minutes about various work that that ad hoc committee is engaged in, including the mental health screeners that we've been utilizing for the past couple of years, the creation and use of an intervention form intra-district to help think about and help support social, emotional, behavior, and mental health supports. The adoption of the social emotional learning curriculum, kind of that tier 1 approach to ruler, as we've talked about at this table before. We reviewed the continuum of therapeutic services and discussed an update on the progress of creating a local mental health, a process for local mental health providers to seek permission to deliver services to their clients in our buildings. And so that was a review of what was discussed in both of those parts of the SIAC meeting. Our next meeting will be on April 17th, where we will look at both panorama data as well as bullying and harassment data as dictated in code. Are there any questions? Great, thanks.
Thank you. I think you can probably stay put because I think we're looking to you on the next item as well, which is our strategic planning update. So take it away.
Sounds good. All right, very good. If we could pull up the slideshow, thank you very much. So, as I think about providing the board with an update as to where are things at with strategic planning, the first update I think that's appropriate is to talk with you about update that we're doing around building consensus around the draft strategic plan. So if you recall, the last time I was in front of you talking about a strategic plan update, I'd shared with you that we were still in process of gaining consensus on much of the plan. There was conversation, of course, with the board about how the board gets to interact with the plan, and then kind of what's going to be happening with the committee. Since that time, we've had 2 different rounds of electronic feedback with the committee. So we haven't gathered in person again, and we won't again until probably May. But we've done 2 rounds of electronic feedback. And then, of course, there was the opportunity for the board to weigh in with some of that content as well. Through that process of feedback, excuse me, with the board and with the committee, let me get to my notes. we've seen largely, for the most part, the changes that were suggested by the committee members in order to get to consensus were around language usage, really few philosophical differences, and all of the feedback from the board suggested language changes rather than philosophical concern with where the strategic plan was at. So we've updated the draft strategic plan based upon the feedback, and we're really at a place where there's large consensus over the vast majority of the plan. There are a few components, however, where there's not consensus right now that we're going to need to figure out a strategy to gain consensus on. At your seat tonight, you should see a draft strategic plan summary. It's also linked into the minutes of this agenda item. But I thought it might be helpful to just look at it on paper so you can see how it's a little easier than I think scrolling through an electronic file. The portions of this plan that are highlighted in yellow or in orange are still portions where we need to gain consensus, right? And largely some of those are philosophical differences rather than word choice differences. So we've cleaned up much of this from a consensus standpoint. There's still a little bit of work to be done. And when we asked the committee members how they preferred we do that work, they largely suggested, again, there's three major parts of this where we saw some change needed. The group's feedback on how to handle that change ranged from 43.8% of respondents to 81.3% of respondents saying, please have a small group get together who share both perspectives and have them kind of have a discussion and make a suggested change. So we'll be getting groups together in order to facilitate that process so that hopefully as we come together with the strategic planning team in May, we have a document that starts from a consensus standpoint. That's our goal. So that's one update to you just around the consensus gaining process. The other update that I want to give you is about what is happening. Actually, I'll tell you what, before I do that, I did want to give just a minute for you to be able to review this document. So that when I stop later on and ask questions, if you have any questions about this document, you may. So I'm just going to be quiet for a second as you look at this document itself. This document was used with the committee members who are part of the action planning team that I'll talk about. Again, you should have one of these at your seat. If not, I can get you one, but I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to look at this organizing document. I know that you've seen much of the content of this already. What the reason this document was created was for the benefit of our action planning teams to help them understand the relationship necessarily, let's say, between beliefs and objectives. So if we're going to be asking our action planning team to create portions of this plan, they're going to be creating what we call strategies and action plans. We wanted to provide something that gave them a grounding in, well, what is a strategy? How does that relate to an objective? How does the objective relate to the mission? So on and so forth. So as much as the content on the right-hand side of the document is important, those brief boxes on the left-hand side were important to help orient that action planning team. So I will talk briefly about what happened last week on Wednesday with our action planning teams. So Wednesday evening, as you probably know, we had the chance to kick off the action planning portion of this plan. We've had a little over 150 folks, staff members, students, community members sign up to be a part of our action planning teams. On that night, 109 of those folks that signed up came to listen to an opening presentation from our facilitators from Cambridge, and then broke out into the first meeting of the action planning teams. So in quick review, what is an action planning team, right? So what are they? What exactly are they doing, right? So you may remember this slide from before, but this is just a good review. So we will have folks that are drawn to a particular objective, right? And I'm going to give you a visual here in just a second, but the strategic planning team has developed what we've called objectives. And the goal of the action planning teams is to take those objectives and identify what strategies or what broad areas of work might be effective at helping us to accomplish that objective, and then developing action plans around those strategies. Again, just through the use of terminology, hopefully you can see why an organizing document was important for our action planning teams. Those action plans are going to be proposals that will be presented to the strategic planning team in May. And then I'll talk with you a little bit later about the flow or the progress of those proposed action plans. On the next slide, you can see a visual that really describes visually what was just written in the previous slide. So it's a graphic that just kind of shows the organization of the strategic plan. Again, so the work that is in blue, right up there, that was done by the strategic planning team prior to the action planning team's kickoff. And the work in yellow is the work that the action planning teams will engage in. Again, so the action planning teams came with mission and beliefs and objectives already established. And their goal then is to identify strategies and action plans for those strategies.
So just to clarify, so for these 6 objectives, there's a team assigned to each objective. Is
Yes.
that okay?
Yep. And then there's so each team has a facilitator. So like, for example, I am facilitating the building stakeholder and engagement support group, and there's other staff members. Some of them are teachers or instructional coaches. Some of the other of them are directors within the district are facilitating each of these teams. And then on those teams, we have a variety of, like, for example, the one I had a student involved and community members and parents, so on and so forth, all compiling to say, I'm interested in this objective, and I want to help the district think through the strategies to help accomplish that objective. On the next slide, actually, it's a really good transition. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There you go.
Well, what are those objectives, right? So if the goal of the action planning team is to take an objective and turn it into actionable work around a specific strategy, here are the 6 objectives that were outlined for those action planning teams that night. That information was also available on our website, so that as people were signing up for it, we were kind of, saying, if you're interested in this kind of work, this might be a good team to sign up for. And we have had a number of folks say, hey, I'm not available on that first night, but I still want to be involved. And so, of course, we're reaching out to them to join us in our second meeting.
So for clarity, Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
the 150 folks that you've mentioned that have signed up thus far will funnel into
One of
6
Yes, sir.
areas.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We do have, and maybe this is getting in the weeds a little too much, but we do have some folks that said to me, hey, I want to stay working with this group, but I'm also really interested in what this other group's talking about. So I'm going to try to bounce back and forth. So when I say 150 people will funnel into 1 of 6, some people might choose to funnel into 2 of 6, so on and so forth. But yes, essentially the idea is that these collective groups will do 2 things. One, they'll review what are we currently doing. In these objectives, there is work that the district is currently doing already in some of these objectives. So they'll review that to say, do we feel like that will meet our needs? And what, if anything, in addition or in replacement, should we be doing?
So these committees are 25 people per committee, which is a large committee.
Yeah.
I mean, like here.
Although they're not evenly split.
Okay. Well,
Right.
okay. So some of them have
let's say that some of them have 15 and others have 40.
Right.
15 is a large committee and 40 is a large committee. How is the work going to function? How, like the actual
Right.
work? Are there professional staff who are dedicated to them? These who are responsible for actually doing the staffing work?
I don't know that I understand what you mean by the staff.
I'm wondering how a committee of 40 people gets anything done.
Okay, so very likely each committee is going to identify multiple strategies and then they may break into subcommittees around those strategies.
Okay. And is there somebody who's chosen as president or leader or director of the committee, of each committee? Chair. Is the
Yeah.
word.
No, I don't know that we're at that stage. We have identified obviously the facilitator, but I don't know that we have like, oh, you're going to be the chair of this subcommittee on this strategy.
Okay.
That hasn't been discussed.
But there, you did say there's a
Staff.
district facilitator that's a staff member for each of the 6.
The other thing that I should mention when it comes to process is as internal facilitators. So I may wear 2 hats in this process, right? So I may be the facilitator for this team, but as an internal facilitator, Director Miller and I will be meeting with the facilitators of each team weekly to talk with them about, okay, so where are you at in your process? And again, there's a slide later on to talk about the 5-step process that the teams will go through. What strategies are you considering? What support can we be to that? If you need help with examining the literature base around this, or if you need help with connecting with a school who's doing some similar work. So as internal facilitators, we'll be playing a role to help facilitate that work as well.
Okay. So some of these objectives, I know I was part of the people who sat around the table formulating them, but now that I think about dividing people up to try to accomplish these objectives, it seems that many of them are so interrelated. It's complicated to think about how you silo the work in these objectives.
That'll be actually one of the roles that Aaron and I will both play in the process is if we see that the way 2 teams are. So one of the things that we thought about was, is there going to be a natural synthesis of the building stakeholder engagement and support group and the organizational responsiveness and communication, right? As the person who led the stakeholder engagement group, a lot of the conversation was about communication, right? So we could see potentially that the strategies being pursued allow for an opportunity for those teams to synthesize and to come together. But we won't know that until we see the strategies. But again, that will be something that Aaron and I can help us have a balcony view on to see, exactly what strategies are being suggested and would it make sense that teams combine either holistically or within parts. So,
Yeah.
And then remember, at the end of the process, of course, all of these will be presented back to the strategic planning team, who will have the opportunity to have some input. Again, I've got a slide about that later on in the process, who can then also help make any kind of natural synthesis that needs to occur.
Yeah.
So this is, just to clarify too, because I had some of the similar thoughts, but then this is Cambridge's process, right? They've dictated this is what has worked, been successful for them before.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yep. All right, if we're ready, I'll go to the next slide. So this was one of the pieces of information that was presented to the attendees on that night in the large group setting. We just wanted the folks who were going to be thinking about the strategies to accomplish these objectives to be thinking about what might constitute a quality strategy. So for example, our strategies should align to state law and to board policy, or a good strategy might consider the current work, but also offer fresh ideas, particularly if there are obsolete initiatives that we're doing, right? The strategy suggested should align to the mission, the mission, beliefs, and parameters. Then next we presented them, and I wanted to share with you the stages that these action planning teams will go through and the proposed timeline for those stages. So the first stage, of course, is to analyze the objective. Those 6 broad statements. What exactly is this asking for? What was the intent of the strategic planning team when they listed this as the objective? What type of work might we consider in order to help accomplish this objective? The next stage then is information gathering and getting fresh perspectives. So part of that information gathering stage I've already mentioned will be what work is currently being done in the district around this objective. And then what are some best practices either suggested by literature or what are some best practices of districts that are engaged in similar work doing, right? So some information gathering stage. The team will then determine here's the strategies that we think are highest leverage to accomplish this objective. And they'll move into action plan writing, right? So they'll start thinking about the specific steps or results that they want to write into an action plan. They'll actually develop those action plans with specific steps and sequences. The guidance from Cambridge is try to write an action plan that can be accomplished in a year. Now, we've also told these action planning teams, what you won't know is, is our plan either, first of all, accepted, or will we be asked to modify it? But if it is accepted, how will then that be prioritized? Let's say that we get several pieces of work that all could be accomplished within a year as a result of these action teams. That will then need to be brought back to either staff or the board or a combination in order to say which one needs to happen first. And then I would suggest also, what will implementation look like that knows we're ready to move on? Or are we moving on to number 2 because it's 2024? Or are we moving on because we've achieved a result we want? So we'll have to talk about what successful implementation looks like. That'll help those who are implementing considerably. After they've written the plan, they'll be asked to think about a cost benefit analysis, kind of an investment on return. I said that wrong, return on investment. Anyway, sorry. So they'll be asked to think through, what might implementing this strategy and this action plan cost, and is the benefit of that cost really worth it, and we want to move it forward in proposal. They will then finalize their reports, present it to the action planning team, the strategic planning team. There's a lot of terms here. The action planning teams will present to the strategic planning team. And then in the next slide, it talks about what might happen at that stage. So according to Cambridge, the strategic planning team can say, yep, we accept this proposal. No, we reject this proposal. We actually want to return it, right? We want to return it to the action planning team, but they were really clear. The strategic planning team does not rewrite the action plans, right? Again, this is put into different stages of the process for a reason, right? And they really don't want the same people who are coming up with the philosophical to be the exact same people who write all of the pragmatic. They should approve the pragmatic, but they don't want them to write the pragmatic. So again, they can accept, reject, they can send it back. They can accept with a stipulation. They've described that as minor tweaking, and they can identify gaps. Hey, I like the plan. We want to do this, but we don't see addressed as this. Can you take it back and please address this portion? Once the strategic planning team feels they have strategies and action plans that will successfully accomplish those objectives, the strategic planning team will then bring that plan to the board for board approval. And upon your approval, all of this will move from a draft strategic plan and a draft action plan and a draft strategy to an approved strategic plan that we will then prioritize and work around implementation.
I have one question, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thinking about the quality strategies will slide,
Yeah.
taking all that into account. One thing I don't see there, but I think might be under the consider the current work of Ames Community School District. Quality strategies will also align to Dr. Lawson's vision for the district, correct? I mean, there's a way that because Dr. Lawson has 100-day entry stuff he's done, and there's a lot of work there, we're going to have some way to correlate alignment there too, right?
Yeah, obviously, as a important voice both on the strategic planning team as well as here as we make decisions, we're going to we will need to make sure that all of our work well aligns to the vision that we collectively have decided we want to move forward with. And I can't imagine how we would do that and not align that to what our superintendent believes is important.
Yeah, and it seems like that'd be good input to the strategies that the action planning teams are doing is, there's some really good things that Dr. Lawson came up with last year that he observed and he made reference to. And I just want to make sure those teams know those things too.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So you said that Cambridge recommended that strategies can be accomplished in a year.
The action plans, yeah.
Do they have any suggestion on the number that you should be trying to accomplish within a year?
They haven't suggested a specific. One reference in one of their pieces of literature was to suggest that these teams at the initial stage try to consider somewhere between 3 and 6 strategies to learn about, but there wasn't a set number of strategies that they've suggested actually gets proposed to the strategic planning team. Rather, they've suggested process, and that is before a strategy and its subsequent action plan can be presented to the strategic planning team, it has to be one that all of the members of that team feel are the right work for the district to be engaging in to accomplish that objective.
So I would assume that maybe the strategic planning team, since they can exclude some, may be looking at it more holistically on what can actually be accomplished.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know where that stage will come in, whether that will come in through the prioritization process that happens afterwards, or whether this is kind of my first round with the Cambridge model as well. So somebody certainly is going to need to be looking at what's feasible and what needs to be prioritized, right? I'm not sure what stage that comes in.
But this could be multiple, like this is multiple years of work. It's just which we just prioritize when we're
Certainly,
doing.
yeah, this is intended to be a 5-year strategic plan. And so figuring out, at least I believe that that's what's intended, is a 5-year strategic plan. So figuring out how we prioritize and sequence that work. And again, I'll put a plug in again I think it will be important for us to, once we've identified a strategy that we think will accomplish an objective, I think it'll be really important from an implementation standpoint that we put together some sort of guidance that helps people know what successful implementation looks like. Because at least I, for one, I'm a few months ahead of myself here, but I, for one, would lobby that we move on to the next stage of implementation and the next strategy, because we've seen success in implementation rather than we've seen August come.
So in discussion with Cambridge, one of the recommendations was not to take on more than 3 strategies per year. And in terms of the strategic plan overall, 3 to 5 year process.
Thank you.
And I think a key thing they also talked about too, right, is this isn't, you said it once and then in 5 years we redo, but it's like kind of revisiting and iterating each year based on how it's going. So like a strategy could be changed or a new action plan could come about, but really getting into a rhythm of setting what we want to accomplish, then going after it, then measuring, did we accomplish it? Sure.
All right, my last couple of slides for you. Actually, I'm going to skip slide 11 and go to slide 12. We've had folks who have said to us, I don't know that I'm able to be on any of the teams, but I have some ideas I'd like you to consider. We've also had some folks that say, I'm going to be with this team, but I have some ideas that I'd like this other team to consider. And so what we have created is an online opportunity through our website for people to offer feedback specific to a team around a specific objective. So if folks want to say, no, I don't have time to be a part of any of these committees, but I think something that the action planning team should consider in order to, I'm just going to use mine, build stakeholder engagement and support is to find a way to provide transportation to kids to activities so that we can increase activity. I'm just making something up. But if somebody has that idea and they want to present that and submit that to our team, but not attend the meetings, there's a form that's available on our website for them to do so until March 24th is when we identified that we would stop doing that, because after that time frame, that team really should start to be honing in on learning more about the strategies that they want to investigate further. My last slide before asking if you have any questions is just a few action shots of those teams on that night. And I will take the opportunity at the table here just to say thank you to the facilitators and to our community for coming out. It was really great to see such a broad array of stakeholders and such good numbers at that night. I know that there's a lot of passion in our community for the success of this plan. I again want to say thank you. I know the people that are doing the facilitating are going to spend a lot of hours over the next few months doing this work. And so I thank them very much for that. With that said, what other questions can I answer?
Do you have an approximate breakdown of the membership between, you said staff, community, and students? Like how'd that
Not off
end
the
up?
top of my head. I could do it. I could get that in the weekly update if we wanted, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. Do we get a lot of students that volunteered and came? I know that was one of the things we had talked about.
Sure, we had one or more student in each group. And I want to say there were maybe, this is a rough guess, but 8 or 9 students that showed up that night.
Okay.
It's an approximation, but
That might be a
I can break that down and get that for you in the weekly update.
I'd love to see more student involvement. That would.
One of the things that I would assume we talked about in everybody's group, I know we talked about in mine, and that was how do we go out and recruit other folks? Again, as Director Smith talked about, like some of our groups are really big, right? My group had 9 folks in it, right? And so we could benefit from recruiting other folks. We did have a student join our group, but yep. You're right. The more students, the better. What other questions can I answer for you? I would anticipate that a logical time for me to come and give you the next update is once those teams have started to identify the strategies that they're working towards. And then again, maybe after our next meeting of the strategic planning team, so we know kind of what's been happening there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great.
And we did not have anyone signed up to speak under our discussion items. So I will go ahead and open our public forum and read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we'll begin this evening with Judy Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Judy Brown, 5423 Tennessee Street in Ames. Even though I was a bit of a jock, even more of a jerk in the middle of high school, somehow I managed to make my way to the theater department and act as John Proctor in The Crucible and a couple other plays. Mr. Hansen welcomed me. I felt right at home immediately. He was a funny guy. He took in theatrical misfits like myself and made us feel at home, building sets and learning blocking and memorizing lines. It was so out of character for me, but he made being a thespian part of my character. Hank brought plays and young people to life. My recollection of that time under his direction is among the happiest of my life. The Ames High 1982 swim team won the state championship with Coach Mike Whitmer. 40 years later, I'm still proud to have been part of that effort. But I'm just as proud to have been part of the school's production of King Lear and of my role in the senior directed one-act plays. I was a fish out of water and happy as a clam. Hank was fearless and ambitious and forgiving. He didn't take any guff. He was determined to build real actors out of kids. I'll never forget his goatee, his leisure suits, his pointed insights, and the friends I made in those plays. Absolutely nobody deserves the honor of having the Ames High Theater named after him more than Hank does. He was one of a kind, a legend among the thespian class of 1982, and I feel very lucky, as many others probably do, to have known him. Sincerely, Jim Munson, class of 82, currently CEO of Brooklyn Roasting Company, New York, New York. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Judy. Victoria Van Boris.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Van Boris, 110 East 9th Street. And I have another letter and it just left my mind, in support of naming the auditorium after Wayne Henson. Hank was a legend in the drama department, despite having retired from directing when I was in school. I was able to take one class with him before he retired, discussion and argumentation, a class my parents really didn't think I needed. It was immediately apparent in his classroom that there was a place for everyone to be themselves. I will forever be grateful to him for showing me the importance of showing up for students when you are asked, whether or not is above or beyond your job. This guides my teaching even now at Texas A&M University Kingsville, where I lead and advise a studio of 30 clarinet majors as an assistant professor of clarinet. My friends and I decided we would put on our own theatrical play, Woody Allen's Play It Again, Sam, the summer before our senior year, and we were in need of a mentor. We asked, and he delivered. He made sure not to do any of the directing work for us, but to point us in the right direction so we could truly take pride in our work and feel worthy of taking the credit for the whole endeavor. He was generous with his resources, but careful with his time and sensitive to our needs, in that he left room for us to do the work and learn by creating, failing, and solving problems. I still treasure the stage makeup book he gave me that allowed me to recreate Humphrey Bogart's famous receding hairline, and will always remember how serious he was about sharing resources. Things should be used and shared, and I think this was how he viewed people and relationships, and especially teaching. We must always pay it forward. I would love for that example to be commemorated by the naming of the new Ames High School auditorium in his honor. I cannot think of a more fitting example of what a teacher can give to their community by igniting inspiration and creativity in their students. Best regards, Dr. Andrea Voss Rochefort, Ames High School class of 2000, Assistant Professor of Clarinet, Texas A&M University Kingsville, Corpus Christi, Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Tony Jackson Lampley.
Good evening. Another tribute for you. Sadly, I have never participated on stage myself, but I attended most of the shows to support my friends who were performing. Wayne Henson chose many shows that were classics, and the old AHS theater is where I was introduced to The Crucible, The Dark of the Moon, and Arsenic, and Old Lace, among many others. I have seen those shows again since then, and the movie versions where they were applicable. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from those important shows as a teen and to continue growing in my understanding of them as I've grown older. After attending college, I went on to marry a drama teacher, have 2 children who were heavily involved in many productions, and have continued my lifelong education about theater. My family has taught me the theater embraces all, and there are many roles in a production that go unnoticed. Everyone can find a home in the theater. For many students, the theater is the only place they feel unconditionally loved and accepted. I have always loved the camaraderie formed in a cast with a great director and the I'll do whatever it takes commitment that directors can inspire. In my observation, Wayne Hansen was such a director. Naming the new Ames High Theater for Wayne Hansen's honors the extraordinary gift he gave to AHS students during his decades as a drama teacher. I would respectfully ask you to bestow this honor on him and on the entire Ames community. Now that I am older and wiser, I confess that if I could do high school over, I would have auditioned for plays rather than trying out for basketball. And this is Anne Trinnell Harrell, class of 1980, former teacher, trainer, and coach, Vancouver, Washington. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Tom Emerson.
Hello again. Some reports. As of March 5th, the number of people signing the petition in favor of Hank in the auditoriums is up to 2,049. In addition, 120 Ames High alums have sent testimonials. You've heard 2 or 3 tonight. And the number of Ames High teachers and administrators has moved up from 16 to 20. Collectively, these 20 have amassed a total of 481 years at Ames High. In Roman numerals, 481 is CDXXXI, and that spells experience. These people know their oaths. Over the weekend, I read all 20 letters of support, and I read them twice, looking for things to excerpt that might be important and insightful. But I realized I could barely scratch the surface in 3 minutes. But I'm going to try. Administrators loved Hank as a person, his commitment to teaching, and the positive impact he had on students. Like Dave Postgate. Hank was a legend at Ames High. Bill Ripp, he was one of a kind, he really was. And Bud Legg, he was a great gem. And you never had to worry about his students might wind up in the dean's office for discipline because it would have been a betrayal of their respect for Hank and the pursuit of excellence he carved into each lesson and or drama production. Now, these same kinds of views were shared by the faculty. Tom Nell's music. He was able to make every student feel they were an integral part of the program with their varying interests and abilities. Kirk Dadow, Wayne Hansen changed lives. He was not just interested in students' ability to perform in his productions, but also in the way they were living their lives. Wayne was a phenomenal listener and always made time for students. Reggie Greenlaw. Hank had the rare gift of extracting skills from his students that they didn't even know they possessed. He was able to reach students from a multiplicity of backgrounds and attitudes, encouraging them to join and participate, I love this phrase, in the most inclusive tribe in the building. John Forsman. Wayne had a special sensitivity to how we all grow up wounded, and that theater could change the false self and help the discovery of the real self. I often wonder how many real people were born while toiling for Wayne in theater. Finally, Mona Smith, sorry. Some students in the 60s and 70s would have dropped out of school if Hank hadn't had them in class or involved in his plays. But Hank's impact continued well into the 80s and 90s and beyond. As former student Sarah Siebert, class of 97, put it, Hank gave me a reason to love high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Amanda Lloyd Juleson.
Hello.
Like that.
Microphone.
Can you flip the mic on? Maybe. It's right on the top. Thanks, Dr.
Although I was trained by, I couldn't project probably well enough if you wanted me to, but okay, so my name is Amanda Lloyd Jolson. I live at 3610 Jewel Drive, and I am from the class of 93. And you've seen me speak a few nights before, but this time I finally got the courage to write and share my own words. I was involved in Ames High School's drama department all 4 years I was there. I started by playing a role in the senior directed one acts my freshman year. From then on, there wasn't a single production I wasn't a part of somehow. I had been performing in musicals with my parents and my siblings, but I was painfully shy and had a terrible fear of singing solo in front of people. Every time I tried, I ended up melting down and in tears. In Hank's theater department, I was seen, heard, welcomed, encouraged, even celebrated. And I was able to find something I was passionate about. And more importantly, I found a home, a family, a sanctuary where I could belong and where I could totally be me. Now, as I write this, I've realized without a doubt that the builder and creator of this equitable and inclusive sanctuary was Wayne Hank Hansen. Hank's sanctuary became something essential to who I was as a growing person. It was invaluable to my well-being, and it turns out his theater department was actually life-saving for me. I was not an average or typical child. Only 4 years ago, I learned that I am neurodivergent. I am autistic, and I have inattentive type ADHD. I am also mentally ill. I was diagnosed with clinical depression in 10th grade. I started seeing a psychiatrist and taking medication. If it hadn't been for Hank and his sanctuary of equity, acceptance, and inclusion, I was at extreme risk of self-harm, drug and alcohol use, risky behaviors, and even suicide. In 12th grade, I was hospitalized. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks for my depression and suicidal ideation. And I went to Hank and I told him about how I was going into the hospital, and he saved a role for me. It was a Greek tragedy that they were doing. And he said, "Don't worry, I know this is important to you, so you're in the play. Even if you're gone for 3 weeks, you're still in the play when you come back." His theater department saved my life and gave me a passion moving forward, leading me to a college degree from Iowa State in theater. And I even attended a but a conservatory of acting in New York City. I also know that this was true for many, many other students who passed through Ames High's halls. The creative arts are essential for the kids who don't fit the mainstream mold. The kids on the fringes of society, the different ones, the misfits, the outsiders, the gender non-conforming, the LGBTQIA+ kids. I'm also a part of that. The out-of-the-box thinkers, the disabled ones, the marginalized ones, the autistic ones. We need a safe space where we can feel comfortable in our own skin, especially what's going on in our country right now. Where we are free to express ourselves as we need to. Hank gave that safe space to many fragile and at-risk children. And now that I have a neurodivergent child in the Ames schools, I hope and pray he will find a safe space like I did. Maybe he'll find one in the new AHS auditorium, and I will be thrilled to tell him about the man it's named after. If it is indeed named after Hank. And at this point, don't you think the question should be, why not? Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And we do have one person signed up to speak via Zoom, Cole Martin. Oh, and he's no longer in the Zoom. Okay, all right. Then I will go ahead and close our public forum and we'll move on to our consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Beerbaum. Superintendent Lawson, gifts to the district.
Yes, thank you. The superintendent's office received the completed form for and recommends acceptance of the following gifts. $1,000 cash from Terry and Aggie Krausman in memory of Brian Cruzy Krausman for the benefit of Ames High Football Program. 39 books valued at $209 from Jason and Kirsty Minion for the benefit of Mitchell Elementary Media Center. $100 cash from Namrata Vaswani for the benefit of the Lunch Hero Program. $23.90 cash, from Julie Fogelsong, for the benefit of the Lunch Hero Program. $20 cash from Franziska Burke-Vins for the benefit of the Lunch Hero Program. $10 cash from Kirk Johnson for the benefit of the Lunch Hero Program, and $10 cash from Julia Silman for the benefit of the lunch program. And those are all of the gifts to the district this evening.
Thank you. It was moved by Winfrey, seconded by Beerbaum to accept the consent items. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our action items, we'll begin with the Ames Middle School track surfacing 2023.
I move the board award the contract for the Ames Middle School Track Surfacing 2023 project to Fisher Track, Inc. in the amount of $103,619.62 and accept alternate number 1 for unit cost of $28 per pound for water pocket fill.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Becker. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Next, we have our policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And that does it for our action items this evening. So we'll move on to our student representative board and staff items, beginning with items from our student representatives. And Will, we'll turn it over to you.
Is that the parking lot is still a mess. There's no lines and it's getting worse. So it'd be great if we could look into that with some of the Ames High administrators or whoever manages that facility.
Thank you. Items from the board, beginning with requests from staff. I did not note anything specific regarding the strategic plan, but just the updates that you talked about that you'll bring in the future, Dr. Hawkins. Any other items from the board?
Will, I have a question for the high school students. Are there not enough trash cans on the parking lots?
cans outside, in the parking lot. But
There are,
there are,
yeah,
okay,
you wouldn't know it.
yeah, you wouldn't know it. But there is a large amount of trash in the parking lot in general.
Do you guys have a school group that is about sustainability or environmental impact or anything?
I believe we do. I don't know the status of it at the moment.
Perhaps they could look into ways in which they could impact the amount of trash that's in the parking lot.
Other items from the board? Items from the superintendent?
I don't have anything outside of, we're making progress on, the naming of the auditorium. The committee, has met. And I am working to finalize some documentation so I can bring some conversation to the board as it relates to that.
Thank you. Next will be our board planning calendar. We do have our next meeting on March 27th. And we don't currently have a work session on that meeting. So that will be after spring break. Any other or any questions or comments on the board planning calendar? Okay, we will go ahead and take about a 3-minute break, and we will reconvene for our work session, and we will be ending our live broadcast at this time.